Good morning, buenos dias, bonjour, and welcome to this Mediterranean Digital Innovation Forum. I'm Nina Hendricks, Regional Director for Southern Europe and North Africa at BBI Communication, an international training and consultancy firm that helps individual teams and organizations to be successfully in culturally diverse environments. So before we start, I would like to thank you, ASCAME and all its partners, for making this 16th edition of the Meta Week possible and for inviting me to moderate this very, very promising roundtable. Today, with us, 6 outstanding speakers. Mrs. Chiara Marcati, partner at McKinsey Middle East, who leads also the IA practice in MENA. Mr. Amadou Dayawara, president and founder of the cluster Digital Africa. He will be joining us online today. Mr. Maël Mbaye, regional manager North Africa of the French Public Investment Bank. Mr. Joan Planella, regional sales head Mediterranean and Barcelona office managing director at Oracle. Mr. Faris Alami, founder and CEO at International Strategic Management, also online today. Hello, Faris. And Mr. Leth Cassis, co-founder of Ventures. Thank you all for being here today and for your interest in sharing your knowledge and experience with all of us for the next 90 minutes. I'm very happy to have you here with me today. So let's start. And let's start with some numbers. The Mediterranean region is one of the most digitally connected in the world. That's very interesting. Around 88% of its population is online daily. 94% of people in the region own a smartphone, and digital consumption is similarly high in some countries. Nevertheless, the meridional and eastern Mediterranean region has only realized 8% of its overall digital potential, compared to 15% in Western Europe and 18% in the US. We also know, and that's an interesting fact, that 8 of 10 jobs will be lost to new technologies. That 64% of existing jobs today will be automated, and that 66% of jobs for the next 10 years have not yet been invented. A lot of stress on young generation who have to decide, well, they will be study, right, for example. So never before had the digital agenda been so necessary and vital. It's not just a response to the impact of the COVID-19, but it also makes the drive for research and innovation indispensable. We are in the era of globalization, climate change, pandemic, energy crisis, digital transformation, collaborative economy, urban concentration, and depopulation of the rural world. Numerous changes that public and private organizations have to face and manage. So new solutions as responses are necessary. So let's discuss today, right, as the time is now, and try to find some solutions here, how we can improve the Mediterranean business environment and facilitate access to finance and business support services to boost innovation and digitally enable entrepreneurship. Ready? Yes. So, let's start with you, Maël. What are, in your opinion, the main challenges that private organizations are facing right now when it comes to digitalization and also to entrepreneurship in the Mediterranean region?
Well, thank you, Nina, for the question. I hope that you can hear me.
Not yet, but soon. Maël with us? Yes. 1, 2, 3.
1, 2, 3. Can you hear me?
Exactly. Quite a nice example. Digitalization. Okay. We'll have another microphone. Thank you. Suspense. We want to hear you now.
Yeah.
Yes.
All right. So thank you, Nina, and obviously thank you to the organizers and ASCAME for the invitation. As it is for me the first Meta Week, and I'm really delighted to be here. And congratulations for the organization. It's an amazing event. Before answering your question, just to maybe give you some figures also about BPI France. So we are the French Public Investment Bank, as you said, and we are supporting more than 80,000 companies every year. And we have obviously a strong focus on the Euromed region, with more than 10,000 companies that we are supporting through finance, business coaching, investment, and so on. And we're also working quite a lot with private and public organizations in order to foster, structure, and make the innovation ecosystem in the region more business-friendly, I must say. Unfortunately, there are still quite good numbers of very big challenges, I think, for private organizations that want to try to, first of all, accelerate the innovation ecosystem in general, but also trying to support digital economy and the transition from, I would say, an industrial economy to a digital one, which is probably the fourth revolution that we are currently going through today. And if we just go back to the basics, I think one of the first main challenge, and I'm pretty sure that you will also talk about this, is infrastructure. And the fact that today access and adoption of ICT infrastructures in the region, especially in the southern countries, remains still very difficult. And even though we have seen a good improvement in some countries such as Algeria, Libya, or Morocco, especially when we look at a mobile network, the access to fixed broadcast and broadband is still very, very low in these countries. And starting from that, when you're an innovative company, if you don't have the infrastructure to develop your technology and try to access new market, it becomes very difficult to develop your business. And especially as if we focus a little bit on digital companies, the backbone of these startups is data. And today, digital proficiency in the Euromed region is still, I believe, quite low compared to other regions and other countries. And how can you try to understand the user experience in the region of your product, digital product, if you're not able to have the right data to adapt your go-to-market strategy and make sure that you can easily shape your business strategy depending on how the consumer reacts to your product. So I think that it's that these are two main challenges today for innovation and digitalization in the region. And obviously, I was in Algeria last week discussing with some ICT and startups. And one of the main challenges that they are also raising is the fact that they are still lacking access to skilled workforce. Because I must say that brain drain is unfortunately still a very big issue, especially in southern Mediterranean countries. And a lot of startups are today still trying to keep their developers, engineers, and so on, that still want to go to other countries because access to jobs and the environment in general is not that, I would say, business-friendly once again, to make sure that you will be able to keep your IT developers for more than 1 or 2 years. And if you add to, I would say, these very basics but vital points, the fact that access to finance, and we'll talk about this also, I believe, access to finance is also still very difficult in these countries. And the legislative and legal framework is also not quite open to digital innovation. Once again, probably you know the startup Yasser. It's a kind of new Uber app in the region. They have been able to raise more than $50 million a month ago. It's an Algerian startup, and they are not able to clearly operate in Algeria because up to now the legal framework does not allow such kind of digital app to facilitate the connections between a consumer and a taxi driver. And this I know that in France and in Europe, we have been facing the same challenges 10 years ago. In Paris, I remember the strikes were quite high. I don't want to make any cliché of the French people, you know, being big fans of strikes. But still, it was a big challenge. But we've managed at some point to adapt the legal framework. And this is something also that we really need to discuss and address, I think, in the region, to make sure that at the end, and this is the last main challenge, we managed to make the Euromed region a global connected ecosystem, not only between southern and northern countries, but also with the US, with the MENA region, and also with Asia.
Thank you. Thank you. So we have already 6 challenges here. Thank you. Very, very important challenges. Any other challenge that you would like to add to this list before we look for solutions? Because that's why we are here today. But let's make sure we understand how important these challenges are. Chiara?
So first of all, I clearly realize I come from Middle East, so I'm in the wrong season. So as you can see, I'm the only one with the short sleeves. But besides that, thank you, Nina, and thank you, everybody, for having me here. So actually, I was reflecting, and I'm completely aligned with the challenge that you mentioned. I would like to complement it with, those are a lot of external environment challenge, which is extremely valid. But if I reflect a little bit with our clients that we work daily, what are the challenges internally that they face, right? Let's assume they're able to overcome all these external challenges. What is happening inside? And I think, first of all, I don't think we can generalize the region, because this region is quite beautiful, but quite varied. So if we think about the Southern Europe and somewhat some country in the GCC, I think they are more in advanced stage. And then there is another layer between like North Africa and some other country in the Middle East, which are more at early stage of their digitization or digital journey, or getting closer to the ICT world. So just to maybe mention a bit, we, as McKinsey, we run every year, and now I think we are at the 6th year, a survey for more than 3,000 companies globally, and we ask about what are the challenges that they face internally to approach the digital world. So if I were to say, let's divide in 2, and let's think about those countries that are more at the early stage, and let's start with those. So more the North Africa, more some of the Middle East country, like Egypt, which we could argue is North Africa and Egypt. But if they think about them, they face mostly 3 challenges that are the ones they verbalize the most. I think challenge number 1 is they don't know where to start. They have the dilemma, let's pick data, I think you mentioned data. Either they think that they overestimate the data that they have, they overestimate the tech that they have, and then when they start, they get stuck because they realize that the starting point is really low. Or they underestimate and they want perfection, and therefore, then they get stuck with challenge number 2. How do I fund that journey? I don't know, I don't have data, I don't have tech, how do I go about it? And I think the issue that they have is that they lack a bit of pragmatism on their journey, and therefore, they always think about IRR and they think about ROI in the wrong way, when in reality, this is a bit of an agile process. You need to small sprint to get to the big target. So the second one is really internal funding beyond the external access to funding. And then the last but not least is not only inability to have access skills, as you mentioned, but really understanding what are the right skills. Everybody heard about a data science and data engineers and product owner, but in reality, they don't know where to start. They don't know what are the fundamental skills that really trigger the journey. Then once they are in the journey, and then let's think about more the Spain, I mean, we're in this beautiful country, so let's think about Spain, France, and all this rest of the Mediterranean region, then the issue is more about, okay, I've started, I've adopted, how do I now become a factory? I know how to do small things, but how do I scale this, and how do I scale this fast? And they get stuck. And then the second challenge that this more advanced country face, which I think it's probably the biggest success factor if you crack it, or the biggest failure mode if you don't crack it, is how I have this beautiful digitized processes, I have this beautiful AI. How do I truly change my operating model and my business model and my decision making to embed all of this in? And many companies find themselves that they're stuck with two separate processes, and then when everything goes to the CEO, it's still manual and still completely rudimental because they forgot to really integrate the day-to-day.
Excel sheets and...
Yeah, Excel sheet. Like recently, I worked with the Minister of Finance in the GCC region. We undergo like 6 months of the wave one of their AI transformation. And then the minister was called by the sheikh for presenting the numbers. And then there was panic in the organization and everybody for a month disappeared. And I was asking, why did you disappear? But we had to prepare the report for the sheikh. And I was like, excuse me, I opened the computer, I turned on the dashboard that they're working in for 10 months, and it was ready the time to turn on the computer and load the link. All their jaw dropped, and I was like, we just worked this for the last 6 months. But I think their mind is still siloed. So I think for me, really that change management and that changing the way of working is transformational. Is the number one challenge that everybody needs to think on early on.
Great, thank you. So we have quite a bit of challenges here, right?
I would like to express another Middle Eastern person coming from Palestine.
With long sleeve.
Right, but I'm wearing long sleeves. First of all, thanks for Askami for the invitation. It's a pleasure to be with you here. I want to share a different point of view. Coming from Palestine and talking about some of these challenges with regards to becoming an innovation engine in the Mediterranean region. I personally like to summarize things in one word. I call it CLIP. And each of these letters has an acronym for something specific. The C is for capital. And I, for one, would like to see more flow of capital in the Mediterranean region on equity-based investments. And we're not seeing much of these funding. And I can tell you, I mean, mostly of the things like debt financing and loans, but we have to introduce more innovative vehicles to promote further innovation in the Mediterranean region. And I'm observing some of the Palestinian startups, if they want to tap into such funds, they would go to Saudi Arabia. I mean, that has been the destination recently, right? But in contrast, I would love to have us coming and fundraising in Barcelona, for example, or anywhere else in the Mediterranean region. So cash and capital flow is key, right? So that's the C. The L for CLIP, the L is linkages. Again, coming from an politically isolated environment, we would love to see more linkages and B2B meetings and getting to be more exposed and integrate with economic value chain within the Mediterranean region. And that is something we would, that's still a challenge for us. And the I can echo the infrastructure here. Mentioned the broadband, we've mentioned, e-wallets, and how important to be integrated as fintech within this Mediterranean region as one. So the flow of payment and all of that facilitation is becoming easier to do business. And with the I, not to forget the policies, I also consider those to become essential to promote innovation engines in the region. Last but not least, the P in the CLIP this is key, where we have to invest in the people. Right? People are the essential. It's not, when people talk about technology, innovation, digitization, I, for one, believe this is a people industry first and foremost before becoming, it's not just technology, it's all about people. And with regards to people, there are two things we need to do. One is education. We've been hearing a lot about emerging technologies, blockchains, metaverse, and AI. That is something we still need to do, to acquire more knowledge, and there's a room and opportunities to innovate within these domains. But there's also the other component aspect of it, which is the workforce development, right? And that is also as essential as the education in the higher education institutions. But the workforce development, I think, is as important as anything else, because I would like to tackle things always from a sustainable point of view by engaging with the private sector. Otherwise, and I'm saying this because most of the time in Palestine, maybe in other countries in the Middle East, we are recipients of EU funding as donations, right? But the trick is that it does not being complemented with the private sector engagement of European companies. And we're missing the point here by not engaging and not involving the European companies to do business alongside the EU funding on donation merits. We're not doing the CLIP methodology, right? And that's what I would like to convey to you and share my points of view. Thanks, Nina, for that.
Great. Thank you, Leth. Thank you very much. So we have quite a few challenges, some solutions already, and some great ideas here. Thank you. Faris, what are your ideas here about how we can actually, what can individuals and educational institutions and companies and organizations like the chambers, for example, do to move forward here with everything we already have heard?
Yeah, thank you so much, Nina, and of course, it's Cami and for everybody on the panel here, and my colleagues. It's really exciting, actually, to have a discussion on this topic, and I feel like the Chamber of Commerce, Escami, and others already doing some things in this space, which is, exposing people to the whole concept of both digitization as well as digitalization for everyone's benefits, right? So the digitization of the information, making sure it's available in a digital form, even our platform today, we have people in person, we have people online, and the whole digitalization, which is transforming the process itself to be digital, is happening. I think more discussions like this is helpful to have. And I love what I heard earlier about education. I think the education system can use a boost in the whole concept of digitalization and digitization of the information. I think also another thing that we could do is really support the infrastructure of the information being available online. And a lot of times, I think when I hear, like, for instance, I heard in the earlier tech jobs are, people are quitting every 2 years. Well, if the whole world is about 3 years average, then sure, we could improve the 2 years to 3 years, but I think we could focus on what is really going on well and do more of it. And what's going on really well is we're adapting technology. People are receptive to being, at the receiving end of information. We could now entice them to do more of that, to say, can you be the creator of this digitization or digitalization of the economy versus just receiving it? So I think more maybe training, more education, and I would say more ecosystem approach, from policy changes to, market to, capital infusion, like, my colleague said, to maybe culture of innovation, which is already, by the way, in the region. If you look at how people hack to a lot of these software or a lot of these systems to get by and make things happen, they already have a culture of innovation. And then, of course, the talent is there. And the reason I say that, because there obviously, we hear about the drain happening, the drainage of the brain, leaving the region. That means there's a lot of talent there that could be leveraged. And I've actually seen in the last decade a new emerging, I'm going to call it trends of awesome, talented individuals leaving countries to go back to their Mediterranean region roots. And we're seeing a lot more of that in many of the countries. And I think part of it is because of this excitement that we're seeing of the fast speed of adoption for technology in the region. Sure, they're adapting it the wrong way, using it, being a user versus being a creator, but there's a huge adoption to it. And there's a huge hunger to the world. I would also say a lot of times, it's just, we're not doing a good job reporting the facts on the ground. I get to work with a lot of entrepreneurs on the ground, and I see many wonderful things happening that is just not, I'm going to call it, being reported in a formal way. And part of it because maybe it's in a local language, so it's in Arabic or in Spanish or, on Greek, but it's not being translated to English, which most people search by. So I think there's an opportunity to potentially formalize the local languages, so therefore there are more mechanism to bring those, things forward so people could find them. And then the second stage would be to translate them versus just getting them in English only, because sometimes it's not feasible to just get them in English because the people that we're working with are not equipped to report them in the way that we need to receive them.
Yes, I completely agree. Thank you. Thank you, Faris. Thank you very much. Joanne, how can support that we are speaking about all these solutions, how can this bring long-term economic resilience, in your opinion?
First of all, thanks, Ina. Thanks, Escame. I'm very honored to be here. Gràcies a la cambra, un lloc espectacular. Moltes gràcies. COVID-19 has proved how companies face with the resilience. It has proved how companies face with the long-term challenges. Here, only I wanted to point out some lessons learned during this period that could serve as going forward. The first lesson could be think simple, think small. Traditionally, companies have focused on big bang projects that led to monolithic systems, that led to systems that are siloed. And this is difficult then to modernize. It's difficult then to adapt to the continuous needs of the business of the organization. So one of the lessons learned is try to think in small chunks and get it done fast. The second one is think nimble. So companies must be nimble to try to improve the service. Of course, today in most of the companies, we have silos, and companies must break these silos internally and also externally. For sure, we have budget constraints, and the budget constraints makes that you have to be agile and detect what is that need and that technology for that moment. The third lesson could be focus on business continuity. Business continuity is the key to face any of the current challenges for the coming pandemics that can arise.
Thank you.
We can have catastrophic weather events. We could have economic downturns. So it's very important to focus in this business continuity. And business continuity, it could help the cloud. Cloud has helped during the pandemic for some companies to work remotely, to provide services remotely, and avoid to broken the production. So focus on business continuity. Cloud could help. We have seen example of universities that has moved the critical applications to the cloud. Then they could contact with the students. They could take the lessons. They could take the operations. So it's important this part. And the fourth lesson could be think as a company in the sense that sometimes we face for budget constraints, and probably it's not easy to move all the critical applications to the cloud. But you can take some advantage if you have in your mind a cloud hybrid environment or cloud hybrid approach, in which you can take the advantage of the cloud in terms of scalable, or in terms of, I don't know, the other terms that could help you on the cloud. And in that, take into account analytics. So analytics could provide the information that you need on time to take the better decisions. Integrations. With integrations, you can avoid the silos and have consolidated data. Security. Now, as it was stated last week in the Gartner Symposium here in Barcelona, cloud is more secure than non-cloud. So having that, I think that we can face these new challenges. We could be more resilient, and with that, I'm pretty sure that technology could help to have a more sustainable society.
Yes, yes. Thank you very much. The cloud topic, which we started the day, and to our first discussion this morning was speaking about the cloud, actually. Great, thank you very much. I don't know if Amadou is with us? Is he connected? Yes? Good morning. Amadou is with us.
Oui, bonjour.
Oui, bonjour.
Oui, bonjour.
Good morning and welcome. Thank you. Thank you. I hope you can hear me well. So, I think it's okay, yeah. We can see you. Welcome. It's an honor to participate in the session. Speaking from the sub-Saharan region, it's a huge honor for us to participate in this and to find out what's happening in the Mediterranean and what's happening in Morocco, Algeria, Egypt. We always look for inspiration from the Maghreb region. And in sub-Saharan Africa, we've heard from speakers from France, from Palestine. So this platform, well, congratulations for setting up this event. And for us, speaking generally, representing the cluster Digital Africa, there are thousands of people, Africans, and talking about innovation from our side. I've listened very carefully what was said yesterday and this morning, and it's wonderful to see the focus on innovation. Each one of us has spoken now this morning. We're now sharing thoughts on different levels. We hear about mobile banking, we hear about digital marketing, but what's important here, what we're thinking of from CDA, Cluster Digital Africa, it's about trying to look at the impact of the digital economy and what impact that will have on finance, but particularly it's to understand what will happen to skills. In sub-Saharan Africa, there's a lot of migration, there's a lot of brain drain. So the question for us is, how can the digital economy provide some key solutions? And I think what's important at this event is we have already set up the Cluster Digital Africa. We are working to prepare the countries for this transition, for this change. And we've been learning from Algeria and Tunisia to see how we can have this shared intelligence, which can then be put to use for the African people. We have issues around terrorism, security, and digital tools are without a doubt going to help that. We've heard about the role of training and teaching, education. Could you share your vision on that topic? What would the role of education be, of research be in this digital transition? Today, the role is key. There's a lack of training in Africa, from sub-Saharan Africa, which is what I can speak about. There's a problem with training the trainers. Trainers to then train young people in the jobs of the future. We talk about, we've heard about blockchain. We've heard about all the new professions that are going to appear, and training is essential for that. I think that transformation on an educational level for the digital transition is necessary. In terms of innovation centres, we can provide some key solutions on a collective level, but also on an individual level. So, and we have to think about how can we train our trainers. Our cluster, CDA, has been thinking about the consequences of the digital transition. It comes down to higher education and research. Most training and education is no longer appropriate for the job market. In sub-Saharan Africa, it's not as industrialized. But if we want to introduce these centers for exchange, which are so required. I have Spanish partners this week. We've been speaking to Spanish partners in Mali, and you know, they say they've struggled to find the correct training, and that's an issue in Africa. We don't have the skilled labor, so education and research is essential to help the new generation to ensure that they do not emigrate, but rather that they stay in Africa with the right training, the right skills. So we need to look at how we can develop that in our region. These are things that we are thinking about. We have regular conferences between Morocco, Tunisia, Algeria, and other African countries to try and find a key solution for our young people, but mainly how to train them. Thank you very much, Amadou. Thank you.
Chiara, any other solutions that you would like to share with us?
So I was reflecting on this question when my colleagues were talking, and I think what I'm hearing and what I think also, if I reflect on my experience, I think there are two ways to look at the solution space. I think what government can do to contribute, and on the other hand, what business themselves can do to contribute on the overall, let's say, digital economy or increase the digital economy. I think, I mean, I don't think there is a solution for government or for business, but I think there's things that I've seen quite successful that I want to speak about because I felt that they move the needle. So, for example, the government of Singapore, I don't know if you're familiar, but they have done a couple of initiatives. So they are really committed to elevate the digital inclusion and the digital level of the entire country. And in particular, there are two things that I was impressed by. I think number one is they have a dedicated effort on talent. They have created something that is called GovTech, which is basically the digital native talent unit that has a mission to build the talent unit, which has the primary role to serve the government. So those digital talent are for the government, which not only give the government access to magnificent talent, but in reality, what does do is also it increase the digital education and savviness and awareness of everybody, because ultimately these folks will move away from the government and will enter the private sector. So it's truly an investment for a country. And I found this being quite interesting. And even for the government themselves, is also quite an agile way to get access to talent, because this digital government is not part of the let's say, it doesn't follow the government rule for hiring and firing and development, because the digital profile are completely different than traditional profile. People come, develop, and move on. And the structure of the contracting and the policy that government has doesn't allow for that. So I really found that initiative, for me, it's something that other government can really...
It's very inspiring.
Honestly, I found it, and I found it that, I mean, I'm talking about it a lot in the Middle East, and everybody will take portion of it, but really, I think it's a propelling engine for government. The second thing that I loved, and again, it's still Singapore, because I think they're quite advanced, is they are developing tools and assets for themselves, and then they are giving access to the private sector. For example, they have created the digital twin of Singapore. It's a 3D replica of the city with all the metadata that underpin all the assets of the city. Of course, they have removed all the confidential stuff, and they have two versions. One that is for government purposes and maybe to access and do smart automation of the city, traffic light, and take decision making. And they have a very light version that private sector can access. And that's tremendous, because if you are a transportation company, if you're another, you have this asset which you have zero investment to make, that is completely at your disposal. And from a government purpose, it's zero extra cost because they had already developed it. And I think that this role of the government wanting to support the organization, I think is fantastic. You wanted to say something? Yeah. And then the second part, and this is not the exhaustive answer, but those are two examples of things that inspired me. And from a business perspective, I'm completely in line with what you said. And I think if I think about the business, again, not to mention, but in our survey, we ask, okay, where is the value? Because at the end of the day, yes, digital, AI, but do you really want to digitize everything? Do you want to do analytics on everything? Yes, of course, you can do, and there will be value to it. But then if you go under the surface, we look at the sector and function, and we realize, well, just for the fun of facts, we assess that digital and AI will deliver 10 trillion extra GDP in the next 10 years. And if you consider that the global GDP now is around 95, 96, depending on the sources, it's quite a significant increase that comes solely from AI and digitization. But then we ask, okay, where is this coming from? And in reality, you see that it's coming from mostly from those sectors that have either high interaction with customer, meaning banking, meaning consumer, meaning telecom, because AI and digital can really accelerate and propel that part, or it's coming from areas where they have huge cost. For example, in the manufacturing, for example, in really heavy supply chain industry. So what we learn from that? We learn that business should just focus where the value is. Look at your P&L, look at the different area where you have value and just focus there.
Let's be practical.
Be practical, but because the resources are scarce, ICT infrastructure is scarce, funding is very scarce, and often innovation is not there, just don't get lost. Stick and face on the value. So if business really stays sharp on where the value is, it will make a tremendous difference and will really accelerate the overall economy and the overall GDP. And I think last but not least, and I know I'm repeating myself, but I really truly think that this is fundamental, is make sure that from day one, you don't even start your digitization journey, you already identify how your decision process will change. Because otherwise you will have, go to my example before, a fantastic, beautiful dashboard that is so impressive, but it will remain on your desk and will never reach the decision maker, so what's the point? So really early on change management make the difference. And then of course, I mean, my colleague mentioned all the others, so I will not repeat, but 100% on all the points you said before.
Thank you. Thank you, Mal. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. If I may just add to that, because I think Singapore is a really interesting example on that. Today they have great initiatives and public agencies also, such as Enterprise Singapore, yes. IMDA and others, yes. that are here really to support and attract investors, startups and so on. And I believe also this is the key, to have the right and proper ecosystem and ground rules that facilitate entrepreneurship, and maybe entrepreneurship in digital sector. And as you were saying, I think that today in the region we have a three-way dynamic. We have Europe, very well integrated, and it's really easy today to launch a startup from Spain and go to Germany, France, UK, I don't know. Then you have GCC, which is a very attractive place, especially when you want to raise funds, I believe. And then you have the other countries. And the problem is that today, especially in North Africa, you don't have the proper ecosystem to launch your business as a startup. You have to take into account that in Morocco, Algeria, Tunisia, even though you have great talents, even though you have ambitious people and very well-skilled people, it will take between 2 to 3 years more to launch your business. While if you're in Dubai, Barcelona, Paris, and other cities. And what we are actually facing is a lot of young entrepreneurs, after 1 year, they just decide to move their business to other places, either because it's easier to raise funds, so they will go also to the US, actually, or they will just move their business in other countries, usually in Europe, and by doing that, the southern Mediterranean countries are losing all the assets that these people can bring and develop. And I agree that obviously today in the labor market, people are moving every 2 or 3 years. But here the problem is that people, it's not that they are moving to another company, they are moving to another country. And that's the main problem. And there are solutions, actually. And I think that governments and public policies are key, in a way. And to give you a concrete example, for example, BPI France, we've been working with the Tunisian government for the past 4 to 5 years to try to work on what we call a Startup Act. And this Startup Act has been actually very, very important to kind of set, as I said, the ground rules of what is innovation and how startups today in the country can actually start their business here, address the Tunisian and maybe the regional market, and stay in Tunisia to address international markets. And from there, we have been creating a fund of funds also to attract investors and also set what we call a sandbox, regulatory sandbox also, so that these startups, digital startups, can try their product and benefit from digital proficiency and data that the market is willing to give to these startups. But this, you see just a few examples, but these are for me also the very basics but very important things.
Creating right ecosystems.
Exactly, and that sometimes we quite forget.
Yes, thank you. Very important, Mile. And I'm staying with you now because I would like to go further and speak about investment requirements, of course. How do you see that, and how can we facilitate the access to the finance, really? Because we know it is one of the main C letter from the clip, right? Yes, tell us.
Well, first of all, I think when you're an investor, you'll be looking at the market and see to what extent there is stability in the market, so that when you invest, you're sure that your return on investment will be here, first of all. And I think this is one of the main challenges today for many Mediterranean countries, is to obviously promote their industries, but also promote strategies in terms of industrial sector, agricultural sectors, and so on, and give a kind of a long-term perspective so that investors can really see themselves, you know, pulling their money over there and trying to support companies. And so market stability is very important, and also market integration. And unfortunately, I think this is one of the main pain points today in the region. When you launch your business in some southern countries, it's easier to go to northern countries than to your neighbor. And this is quite tricky, I think, because it doesn't give you a real potential in terms of international expansion that you would like to give to your company. And so therefore, investors might be a little bit more reluctant to go and support you. And then there is obviously the legal framework, especially in terms of foreign exchange controls. When you invest, you want your exit. How can you get your exit today in some countries? So after that, this is maybe more for investors, and then for entrepreneurs, access to finance is still very difficult, as you were mentioning. And even if today there are a lot of subventions, grants, and so on from different kinds of organizations, when we talk about loans, honestly, today the banking system is not made for startups and digital companies, especially when you ask the entrepreneur a mortgage guarantee to get a 50K loan. It's impossible. In other countries, I believe it's the case in Spain, maybe in the GCC and so on, there are public guarantees and there are other forms of guarantees that facilitate the access to that kind of loans, which is not the case in many countries in the region. So I really believe that today the banking system, even though it's a very mature one and that quite impressive in terms of capacity to inject money, they need to reinvent themselves. They need to innovate, actually. And then also talking about equity, investors have to accept the risk. So obviously, the government and other stakeholders must create the proper ground for that. But what we can see also is that there is still a lot of risk aversion from the business angels and from the venture capitalists to invest in these in companies and in startups. Why? Because also there is a lack of methodology in terms of how to assess a proper innovative companies and startup in the region, which might be a little bit different from the startups that we have in the US or in Europe in terms of return on investment, economic impact, and projection for international markets. And last but not least, fintech, you were mentioning it. I think this is the best way today for startups to access funding is through digitalization. But today, we lack also this kind of solutions because fintech, due to legal and other constraints, are not able to really address these entrepreneurs.
Thank you. Thank you, Mile. Amadou, est-ce que vous aimeriez...
Would you like to mention the needs for investment in the digital economy and how we can facilitate that access to funding, finance? Amadou? Can you hear us, Amadou? Hello? Can you hear us? Could you repeat, please? I was asking your opinion on investment and finance for the digital economy and how we can facilitate this access to funding for digital startups, etc. Well, I think the previous speaker spoke a lot about financial guarantees. That's very important in our countries, and whether that be in Spain or in the Maghreb, there are far more advanced approaches, but in sub-Saharan Africa, it's very complicated. But when we see the global economy moving so quickly these days, the solution to digital economy in our country, that's where we want the investment to happen. That's why I'm so interested in participating here today and listening to the other speakers. What we have in the economy today, we've heard about the startup in Tunisia. I think it's the Tunisia, Senegal, and Mali. We have been working on the Startup Act, but it's had zero impact so far. I would say that in general, just now, apart from the payment platforms, we've spoken about the free circulation of capital from one country to another. That's what we need to see improving. And financial transaction, that's well-established banking platforms, several digital innovations. These innovations that we see, the fintech, there's lots of possibilities to exchange money in the rural economy. This must not just remain digital economy and innovations in the urban economy. It must move to rural areas as well. People are dispersed. It's not just a concentration of population in big cities. So the financing and the technology, that's where we have an issue, and that's where international actors, and I would invite those of you here today to come to Africa and invest. It's a period of crisis where there's an opportunity. That's where the needs are. And that's why people should take the risk to come and invest. It's not just when everything's going well that they should come. Chinese are now coming to Africa, and Europe is missing out on everything that's happening in Africa because of the difficulties. It's time to provide solutions. Come to our territory and look to see what solutions, financing solutions can be provided there. There's endless possibilities in Africa for finance services to allow investors to benefit easily. The solutions that we have in France, we speak about PP France, and we speak about Africa. but actually they need to come on the ground, come and see how the investment can be attractive here in Africa and take the risk with us. There's possibilities to really make progress in our content. I'll leave it there, but I would say that investment and how we're going to find the solution, if we need these collective synergies. We've spoken about the case of Singapore. Yes, we need the political will, we need stability in our countries, and we need good governance, which is not existing at the moment in many of our countries. The environment makes things very difficult, and that might make investors reluctant. But we need the Mediterranean, the sub-Saharan African citizens. The opportunities are there. There's growth opportunities in Africa. There's an aging population, but there is knowledge, there's expertise, and there's finance available. So they should come and participate in the development of the African economy. It's time for investment in Africa and for them to come. And to conclude, the digital transition is not just about a means to an end, but it's really about playing a role in the growth of human capital, and that's very important. Yes, indeed, stability, growth, youth, and create these bridges.
Speak about bridges, that's my word. I love that word, collaboration, bridges. I would like to come back to you, Leith, about how innovation and digitalization can actually create these new bridges and collaboration between Africa, Europe, Middle East, the whole region. What is your view on that?
I do share my view with my colleague here about we need an ecosystem for this entire region to be one. And I think we're very slow. We're failing in making these borderless region for the Mediterranean. It just puzzles me whenever I hear key speakers, there's an energy crisis in European countries, but there's sun in southern Mediterranean and gas being pumped up from the seashores, and we're not integrating these countries to become borderless and treat them as one. That's on one side, right? And I again hear that there's an aging crisis in Europe, with aging group, but there's a growth in population. Like my country, more than 50% of its population are less than 18 years old, and similar to other countries in the Middle East. And we're not putting that into good use, I guess, right? And I'll speak of modalities of cooperation on that. But I just wanted to state that we're failing in terms of looking at this region as a whole, as one, and integrating its resources to become one, because there's economic opportunities in north, there's resources in the south, and we're not putting things together in an efficient or effective way, it seems to me, right? But I'll share with you another story that complements entrepreneurial startups ecosystems, which to me has to do with the private sector engagement all the time, which is the multinationals and the corporates in Europe, right? That augments my colleague here. And I'll share you a story of a company called SAP, has HQ in Germany, first and foremost. But at one point of time, they sold their agency to do business to a Saudi agent, right? And the Saudi was at his comfort. This company was very, at its comfort. They were not doing much in terms of sales or gaining sales traction. Of course, much to the delight of Oracle, because they were eating the Saudi market alive. And they were. I mean, and the SAP were looking at the Saudi market and say, "Oh my God, we're not gaining any sales traction. We're not doing any business. What are we going to do?" So they had to buy the agency back from the Saudi with millions of dollars. So out of Dubai, they came back again to try to do business themselves and try to compete again with the oracles. Slowly but surely, they were gaining more traction. They were getting some client and implementing software enterprise solutions. But they were tapping into people from India and talent from India. And guess what? That also has its own merit of problematic ways of doing business, because To make a long story short, SAP realized that you have to bring talent and people that have cultural and language affinity to increase the probability of having successful deployment of solutions. And these are the talent that can come from the Middle East. And that's the moral of my story, which if you bring corporate from Europe, try to target new markets in Saudi Arabia and the Gulf region by augmenting all the resources in the Mediterranean, you may have a crack at increasing your economic output from this region by integrating all these resources into economic value chain. And we have the opportunity together to target new markets, whether in Africa or in the GCC countries, and doing that together. And this is a model of cooperation. I would like people to just, be more aware of its potential. Maybe it's not hard to practice. It's in theory. Transforming that from theory to practice requires leadership, right? It requires visionary leaders in our community, but I think we can find them. Having said that, COVID gave rise to an opportunity of Palestinian talent to do remote work with European countries, working out of co-working spaces. And I've seen that firsthand. Hey, what are you guys doing here every day? Oh, we're doing some work with this company. Where is this company based out? It's based out of Europe. Wow, are you serious? Yeah, I'm charging them $100 an hour or something like that. So young people are disrupting things on their own, while the framework of policies and governments are slow to adapt and gain foot, right? And I fear that if the corporate structures are also becoming elephants and slow, then we're missing out on integrating over and over the economic value chain integration. And I will end it here. This is something that is close to my heart, and I would like for us to start introducing such modalities of cooperation.
Yes, thank you very much. Faris, what are your views on these bridge topics?
Well, a bridge, I think, is important. And, I would like to go back to a couple of things. One, I think there might be 5 points that I was trying to write them down before I speak. And I want to talk about the bridge in 5 ways. I think there's a mindset shift that needs to happen. And I think it is in 2 ways. The first one is us, ourselves in the region, those who are living in the region. I don't live in the region every day, but I do work in the region on a daily basis, on a monthly basis. I need to shift their mindset and the way we talk and speak about the region itself, because I feel like we're always looking at the negative things that we have in the region. And I have not been to any country in the world yet, and I've touched 100 of them, that have not had negative things, including the best of them, including the worst of them. They all have good and bad things. And I think the biggest difference usually is those who choose to do really well promote what they're doing really well as well. So I think the mindset shift of promoting what is working in a positive way is important. The second is the mindset shift needs to happen from the collaboration of that other side of the bridge. The bridge has 2 sides, right? So the other side has to also think about the region as not a consuming region or a resource region, but more of a collaboration or a place for us to play together. And I think you're seeing some of that happening from Asian countries coming to the region, looking at the region as an opportunity to collaborate and finding ways to work together. And I think we could learn from that in the region to say, we need to think about each other in an equal way versus me using you or you using me to get to where you need to go. We need to come up with common grounds. The second thing I want to talk about is image. And I think there's an image about the region, the Mediterranean region, both sides of the, call it the Isle of the Mediterranean Sea, as well as the entire, extended region to the GCC, that needs to be also shifted. And that image is going to have to take a little bit of time to shift. And I think it comes with 2 more things underneath it. One is promoting the goods of what's happening. And then second, investing in our region. I think one of the things I saw in the 90s, most people invested in the region by taking the resources out of the region somewhere else. And in the 2000s, I've already seen a lot of people waking up to the sense that if we don't make the investment in our communities, no one else will. So having an investment in ourselves, in the communities that we live in, is really vital. And that will attract more investments to come from the outside, because people don't want to invest in places that people who live in those places are not investing in them themselves. So the more you invest in it, the more attraction of those investments will come outside. And then the last thing is we got to start with what we have. We always trying to get to where we want to go, which is nice. But if we don't start where we have and what we have today, we're not going to go to where we need to go. So I'd say last thing is building these bridges, start with what you have versus what you need or what you want to have.
Great. Yes. Thank you very much,
Maybe,
Faris. Yes.
Sorry.
Chiara.
I love the point that you said of borderless, thinking borderless. But I wonder is, I mean, at the end of the day, we have to face reality, and it's beautiful, but I don't know how practical it is in the short term. So, and maybe it's less of an assertion, it's more of a reflection. I love also the point that you said about the youth. So maybe what government can do is really reflect on 2-3 pockets of collaboration that are very small, but make a massive difference, like youth. I mean, I think your point is, why can't government really say, I want to make a difference in youth? There's nothing political about it. There is nothing to do with oil. There is nothing to do with any geopolitical, but let's make youth have access to a better world. Like, why don't the government in Europe really help this channel of, make this institutional channel for Palestinian youth to contribute in
You're asking the wrong person.
No. But my point is, what I'm hearing and what I think also in my experience is that sometimes we think big, which is good. We think bold, which is good. But if we don't think small and practical, we can't make a difference. And maybe, I mean, the president of the chamber, unfortunately, is not here, but this is something that the Chamber of Commerce can practically do tomorrow. Identify 2-3 sectors that really need digital talent, speaking of digital, knock at the door of some of the thinkers yourself, and just tell me the 100 names, 200 names, 300 names that I can put in the collaboration tomorrow. And I think that this is just somebody that wake up in the morning and really want to make a difference.
Yes, leadership. We spoke about leadership, right?
Yeah.
And youth, definitely. They were born with a smartphone in their hand, right? So they are sensitive to the topic anyway, but they need to be trained. And this is something that we have all detected here. There's a need for training, there's a need for upscaling, there's a need for education. So let's make it happen, right? Yes, thank you, Chiara. Joanne, speaking now about Sustainable Development Goals, that's a big topic. How can we capitalize the digital economy driven impact, and how can we actually use it in order to contribute to the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals?
In these goals, we have 17 objectives, important end poverty, reduce inequalities, and tackle climate change. Here I have a phrase from my CEO, Safra Katz, in order to summarize everything. That is, Oracle is committed to embedding sustainability across our enterprise and delivering innovative cloud technology to accelerate meaningful change. Then let me talk what we are doing at Oracle as an example. We face sustainability in both ways. First of all, what are we doing by ourselves? And the second, how we help our customers. Our 2025 goals are achieving 100% of renewable energy in our cloud regions. Today, we are the tech company with more cloud regions around the world, more than Amazon, Azure, etc. That's the first point. The second point is that our key suppliers have a sustainable program in place. And the third one is reducing 25% our employees' travel emissions. But why? Because we want to get, by 2030, 50% of reduction of emissions to achieve, by 2050, be net zero. Those are goals. Where we are today. Today, we have achieved in Europe that all of our data centers and operations use 100% of renewable energy, as well as LATAM, North America West, and Canada. Our key suppliers, 88% have a program in place, and more important, 83% have an ISO certification, ISO 14001 or ISO 50001. Other things, all of the hardware that we collect, 99.6% is reused or recycled. This is one part, and in this part, that what we are doing also is what we are doing for the society. We have 44 global green teams. Our Oracle volunteers have donated more than 61,000 hours to the communities, and we collaborate with more than 7,000 non-profit companies around the world. And what are we doing for our clients? As it was stated by our CEO, we want to provide the cloud technology to accelerate the meaningful change. In that change, we provide technology. It could be ERP in the sense that this ERP could help them in order to set the objective, to track the objective, providing the carbon calculators to calculate scope 1, 2, and 3, to provide analytics and so on. We provide, on the S of ENG, technology for managing the people, for managing the inclusion, and so on. And for the supply chain, also, we provide all the technology to help the clients to manage circularity and to be more efficient. But let me put 3 examples of companies. We have Unilever. Unilever, I have here. Unilever is improving its transportation efficiency using technology, and they have reduced 10% the global emissions. Or we have AgroScout that using IA technology, using drones taking image from the fields, they have increased the production by 30%. Or another one that is quite interesting, that is OceanWorks, a startup that using track and trace technology has given a second life to all the plastic waste collected in the oceans. So, as a summary, digital economy has a clear impact on sustainable goals and also economic goals. And we, as a company, we focus on what we can do by ourselves, how we, our people, can give something to the society, and also provide the technology to the clients in order to make that they achieve these sustainable goals better.
Yes, thank you. And I think this is important because sometimes we believe, and I'm not a digital expert, but sometimes I'm a little bit reluctant, right? We think about digital and we think, how much is it compatible with sustainability? And then when you look into the question a little bit more, you can actually find out that it can be very much compatible and it can be very supportive in achieving our goals to make this world a better place, right? I would like to summarize a little bit now and ask all of you, and surprise, this was not perhaps very much prepared, but I would like you to think about one wish or one major idea that you would like to bring in here to summarize this round table. Something you would like to request to governments and to the Chamber of Commerce, to ASCAME, to the region, or something that you would really like us to keep in mind to continue this journey of digitalization and innovation, entrepreneurship in the region. Who would like to start?
I will start.
Right.
So, in my opinion, I think that my wish is don't be scared about technology.
That's a good one. That's for me. Yes?
And act. And act. Think small, think nimble, act. That's my idea.
Yes, and it's a very good one. I think that most of people are afraid, as you say it, and don't know where to start. And we start, me as as an entrepreneur myself, I think, oh, we need to start this journey. We have a lot of pressure. Let's be digital, and then we think about these huge projects that will never happen because of the whole change management. And yes, so starting small and not being afraid. That's a good summary.
And maybe because that was the same thing I would have said. So thank you for stealing it. But beside that, I think let me add. I think also let's not get in the trap of the excuse. Oh, no, but I can't do if this person cannot do. Every single individual, business, government, citizen, young can do something to change. And I think if we get out of the circle of the excuse and we act, I think it will make a difference. And everybody should actually put a meaningful goal for themselves and says, this year, those are the 3 things that I will do different as a CEO of a company, as the president of the Chamber of Commerce, as an institutional member of the government. Anything is just really, what are the 3 things I will move the needle on?
I want to steal from Chiara.
You can steal. We are all friends today.
My wish is that European private sector and the innovation ecosystem would have a better inclusion of youth in the South Mediterranean, in the ecosystem in Europe, and that to become a sustainable partnership. That's my wish.
And actually, I fully agree that with Faris, that we don't speak enough about all these great projects and great initiatives that are happening, because at the Meda Week a few years ago, I learned about a project that was happening that was actually offering internship to young people from, I think it was North Africa, coming to Europe, training, going back, and really upscaling. And it was a fantastic project that nobody knew about. And so there is definitely something happening that we in the I'm initially not from the Mediterranean region, as you might notice. I'm from Belgium, but I'm really feel part of this community. I've been in Barcelona for past 18 years now. I feel we don't know how to sell ourselves, how to speak great about ourselves. This is something that other communities, other cultures, other regions do much better than us, and so. This is my wish now. I've just acted. But yes, thank you. I also agree that there is a need for more, definitely. Yes, Maël?
Maybe linked to what you just said, I think we need to embrace the fact that the region is very unique and has a great potential, but let's not copy-paste what has been done elsewhere. I mean,
authenticity.
Have you looked at the number? In the Silicon Valley, more than 103,000 people getting fired because, tech companies during the COVID thought that they would have new business opportunities without really assessing the risks and so on. And 2 years later, they ended up firing a lot of people. So my point is to say that we need our own Silicon Valley here, our own Euromed Valley too. That is not copy-paste from what we can do in Europe, in Asia, or in the US, but with the real assets and impact that we can accelerate also here.
Yes, and with the richness of the cultural diversity we have in the region, which, well managed, will make magic, actually. Yes, Amadou, est-ce que vous êtes là?
Amadou, can you hear us? Amadou? Yes. Great. And your wish to wrap up this panel? Your wish or your final comments? I was listening carefully, and when I listened, the previous speaker talking about no copy and paste, that's very interesting, because the American model, as we saw, well, it's showing its limitations, but we have a different reality in Africa compared to Europe. I think the approach that we have in Africa, together with Europeans, we're very close in many ways. But I want to mention that we launched an initiative, the Cluster Digital Africa, and I call on Meda Week and all participants to support this initiative to share collective intelligence, collective knowledge, and it's about developing the new generation of African professionals and to support the citizens from our continent. In the region, there are some people who are not optimistic, but we have the youngest population in Africa. For decades, we are now more compatible with the digital economy. The young people are there, they're committed, they are willing, they're lacking training and skills, they're lacking financial support. We've mentioned that, but there is an ecosystem emerging that is there. And to really multiply that growth, we need to bring the ecosystem together to support the current dynamic on our continent, but particularly collective intelligence. Access to mobile phones, to artificial intelligence has really changed the African consumer today, but also how are we going to work on the north-south, even the south-south partnerships. And that's very important for African growth. Our ambition should be to work with African actors, European actors, public-private partnerships, civil society, and donors to find answers to the issues we have identified. So in conclusion, in Africa, we have a problem. When we find a solution to our problems, the whole world will benefit from those solutions. So here from the Digital Cluster Africa, we're here to come up with innovative solutions that will benefit the whole world via the digital society. So I would call everyone to continue working to allow the African young people to continue to grow. I have learned a lot. It's been a very interesting session. Thank you for including us in this conference. We're not in the Mediterranean, we're in sub-Saharan Africa. We're part of the continent, the African continent. And our colleague from Palestine has spoke about the skills that are available in the Mediterranean area and looking at how we can cooperate and collaborate, whether that be in Mali, Senegal, Tunisia, Algeria. We can build these bridges so that we have greater benefit. Sorry, just lost the connection slightly. Unfortunately, with the current speaker, just having a problem with the connection. Sorry that we are not getting the best connection right now. So thank you to everyone and congratulations for the event. Thank you, Amadou.
Faris, what is your last word here, your wish to close this great roundtable?
Well, first of all, thank you so much. I have a long list of wishes, but I will go with the word leverage. I think leverage what we already have to really advance where we want to go. And that would be my wish. Start leveraging what you already have as a region, start leveraging what you already have as talent, start leveraging what you already have as people, start leveraging what you have as resources, start leveraging what you have in every way, information sharing, just leverage what you already have. And then I think more will come to the region.
Great. Thank you very much. Thank you very much for your conclusions. Thank you for participating. Thank you for sharing all your knowledge, all your experience. And this is only the start. I'm happy I could introduce you also between you. So I hope this is the start of a collaboration also between you. You are all based in different countries. It's really a pleasure to have this so multicultural, international roundtable. I hope you have enjoyed it, all of you. I definitely have. So thank you very much and see you next year.
Thank you.
Thank you.